All right, welcome to the Lowly Shepherd Podcast with Pastor Jay and Travis Welch. Today, I'm flying solo. My buddy Travis is not able to make it this week, and that works out okay because I really wanted to take some time to talk about some of the recent developments and that's happening in our judicial system. And so I'm going to do that by myself this week, and then we'll pick up with Travis again back in Ephesians chapter 4 back next week. But I wanted to take an opportunity. I thought about doing it last week, but things were kind of hectic and busy, and then I wanted just some time to really think about my response to this. But recently, of course, unless you've been living under a rock, you of course know about the leaked judicial opinion about reversing Roe versus Wade, which of course is the legal precedent that makes it a federal right for women to get an abortion pretty much under most circumstances. And that's been around since 1973, I believe it was. So we're talking pushing 50 years now. That has been the law of the land. And this is a monumental decision to overturn that if this does hold up to be true. And so, as this leak came out about this first draft opinion for the majority position on overturning that, a number of questions kind of came up. And, number one, is it legit? Because, that was sort of the first thing that came to my mind is like, okay, maybe this is some kind of hoax, some kind of scam, because it seemed too good to be true. Because, as a pro-lifer myself, and as someone who's been invested in this battle for many years, it seemed like too much of a miracle almost that this would get overturned, because there's been plenty of opportunities for it to have been overturned in the past, and it just never came to that. There never seemed to be a Supreme Court justice body that was willing to take that step to overturn it. And so I didn't think that would really ever be the case. I thought there would be, little steps maybe being taken in this case from Missouri that was the one that sparked this whole conversation. But, and I think that's what most people thought. No one was really looking for that to happen. And I know it was a shock for me. I actually had a church member that texted me at like 8 o'clock at night and said, praise God, Roe versus Wade has been overturned. And I'm like, no, it hasn't. You're like reading some kind of, some kind of hoax on Facebook or something. And I started looking around, and I looked on the Fox News and on CNN and kind of your big news outlets, and nobody had reported on it at the time because it literally had just come out. She had a source that had like a law professor or something that had texted her about it, and sure enough, like a few about an hour or so later after that, I was starting to see reports about it. I was like, oh wow, okay, this is legit. And then, of course, since then, it has now come out, and Justice Roberts has actually confirmed that, yes, this is a first draft opinion that was written back in February. And so it is legit. And that does kind of bring up some other questions, like, well, how likely is this to go through to the end? How likely is this to continue in this same opinion, and that Roe versus Wade would be actually overturned? Most clerks and justice clerks and lawyers have kind of weighed in and said it's probably pretty likely, given how it was worded and the reasoning for it, that the justices would maintain and uphold this decision. Although it is possible that someone could flip, at the last minute. Of course, it's been a couple months since this draft was written in February. Some opinions may have changed since then. We won't know for sure until the final verdict is handed down, and many believe that would probably be late June when the session is over. The current justice session is over for that to come down, and so there's a possibility that it may not come through. Of course, the hope is for pro-lifers that it would. And what this does, it does not end abortion, but it does put it back into the hands of the states and doesn't make it a federal mandate as it has been since 1973. And so you already have at least half of the states in the United States would at least heavily restrict, if not outright ban, abortion in their states. My current state of, my state of Oklahoma is currently one of those states. I think there's 13 of them that have trigger laws already in effect, that if Roe versus Wade is overturned, that they would immediately go into effect. And so, there are some states where that would take place. And then there are plenty of states, some of the more liberal states like California and Oregon, et cetera, New York, that that would still allow abortion. And so it was about half and half, which is really about where the country is on the issue of abortion. It's about, 60-40 or 55, 45, somewhere thereabouts, for abortion versus against abortion. So it's right at about half, a little more leaning towards the pro-choice position, but that's kind of where it's split upon those sort of lines. And unfortunately, it's a heavily politicized thing where it's basically come down to, Republican versus Democrat on this issue. That wasn't always the case. There were, for many years, there were Republicans and moderates that were pro-choice, and there were Democrats that were very much pro-life. And so it's really, in the last couple of decades, really split down political lines and has made it a political situation that it was not necessarily and shouldn't be, because it really is a moral issue in my mind, not a political issue. And that unfortunately sort of obscures and negates a lot of the conversation, because if you hold this position, you're a Republican, we hate Republicans, so therefore, I'm not going to talk to you about it, and kind of vice versa. And so it's an unfortunate situation that's come about. The next question that kind of comes up is, who leaked this and why? Because that's really what's kind of been the shocker about all this. It's unheard of for something like this to happen, because the restrictions are so strict in the judicial system that, the confidentiality, that if this is being leaked and they find out who did this, and they probably will find out who did this, because there's only a limited amount of people that would have access to it, and there's traces and trails that they could follow, and there's currently an investigation underway. But I mean, the person that did this, their career is done. They will be ruined. Now, there may be the case, depending upon what side or what reason it was done, there may be someone that could offer them protection, but it's their career in that particular field is probably done. And so it's not been done before because of that, because of the fear of that. But someone, felt strongly enough or felt that they would be protected enough to be able to do this. And then, of course, the question is, who and why? The most obvious candidate would be a liberal or progressive clerk of a justice, probably in a desire to either, through the riots that we're currently seeing, trying to get one of those conservative justices to change their vote due to the pressure, which seems unlikely. Another likely possibility is that they're trying to influence and rally Democrats for the midterm elections coming up in the fall, which seems more likely, because Democrats are not faring well, at least in projections right now, because of inflation and gas prices and the things that are going on. And so a lot of Republicans are actually being projected to win back the majority in the Senate. And so sort of this rallying cry is, since it is such a political issue, is hey, vote for the Democrats because we're going to keep abortion around. And hope to kind of rally their base to vote for them despite all the other issues. It's almost like a kind of a bait and switch, or kind of a obscuring the issues that are before them, and say, hey, focus on this one issue to vote in the fall. That seems like a likely option for why you would do that, and this probably is in fact the reason someone would do that. But there are a couple other options. Some have actually suggested that maybe even one of the conservatives could have released this with the intention of these riots breaking out, because the idea is that these justices are not going to fold under the pressure of political opinion, or a public opinion rather, so that this is sort of to solidify their vote and keep them in line, so to speak. And so that's a possibility, but it seems an outside possibility to me personally. Some kind of hold to that track. But anyway, all of this, it really doesn't matter in the end. It's the decision itself, like I said, that's so shocking and so overwhelming. And I know it's a big win for pro-life movement, but it's not the end of the road. There's still plenty of work to be done. Of course, this just kicks it back to the states, and as I've already mentioned, at least half of the states, or about half of the states, are still going to keep abortion on the tables, and mostly with very little restrictions, at least in those states. And then even the ones that are banning abortions are still going to have some, exemptions here and there. And so, abortion is still an issue. It's just no longer the federal government that's putting it out there. It's going to be on the state level. And so it is an important step, and it is a major milestone, but it's not the end of the battle for the pro-life movement, of course. And that's really sort of my first observation is like, there's no patting ourselves on the back and saying, hey, we're done now, let's move on. No, there's still work to be done. And and really, as I've always said, I mean, changing laws is important, but ultimately it's about changing hearts that's really going to be the difference maker in this. And I was having a conversation earlier this week about, I've always thought, of course, I didn't live in that time frame. It was, a couple decades before my time. But, I think about like the civil rights era and the time leading up to that with heavy segregation. And you have, black people have to use different bathrooms and sit at different places on the bus or use different water fountains. And I remember thinking like, man, that was ridiculous. How could anybody think that? And then of course you read about slavery and you're like, how could anybody think that these human beings were somehow less, than white people in America? And, who thought like that? I mean, even some of your founding fathers and your big heroes of the founding of this country, and you're like, man, how could they think that way? And it's just, blows your mind. Like, how could anybody, have that idea and think that it was okay? My hope and my goal and my heart is that, that we could change the hearts of people so that decades from now, they're looking back at this last 50-year period where abortion has been allowed and think, man, how could anybody think that killing children in the womb was a good idea, that this was an okay thing, that this was a moral thing? I hope we can get to that point, but it's got to come down to changing hearts and changing minds. But the first step was changing that law. Whether, and I'm actually... I've heard some people, I actually watched a clip from The View, which I don't watch The View, but, I did watch this clip on it where they were talking about this, and then they actually made a pretty good point where, we're supposed to have equal justice under the law. Well, putting it in the hands of the state basically ensures that there is unequal justice under the law because, it depends on what state you live in as to whether or not you can get the right to do this or not. And I actually agree with that point. I actually don't think that that's actually a good thing. However, I would go on the other end and say I'm all for a federal ban of abortion and just let's get rid of abortion altogether because, as I said, it's a moral issue. It's not a political issue, although it's been so heavily politicized. And really just getting back to, what is this? What are we doing? And I really just think people don't think about it and don't want to think about it. I mean, a basic, high school biology book will tell you that life begins at conception. A unique human being in genetics and consciousness has been created at conception. And it's really, I don't know, it's not humorous, but it's odd that people will argue, well, it's just a clump of cells in the body. It's not an actual human baby until, a certain point. But then there's this arbitrary line of, well, where is that point? Is it when the child, takes its first breath? Is it when the child has a heartbeat? I mean, that's how we determine when someone dies, when their heart stops. Well, how about when the heart starts? Well, that happens pretty on, somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks in the pregnancy. So you're talking at 2 months. Where is the line between it's just a clump of cells, like some kind of, extra organ in my body, to it's a living being? Where do we draw that line? And no one has ever been able to definitively answer that. And then really that's what it comes down to. And if we look at all of the definitions, the textbook definitions of life, of human life, and what determines human life, from a biological, scientific standard, it's at conception. It's that, that early moment when the egg is fertilized and implants in the uterus, and then that's when life begins. And the only reason to negate that is because you don't like that answer, and that's really how it comes down to arguing with a lot of people. about this. And it's really just willful ignorance, honestly. It's willful ignorance and not looking at the facts of what it actually is for the convenience and the sake of what you want to do with it. And I'm also, I've been thinking about this, and so just, as we said, changing laws are good, but changing hearts is more important. And I also want to say, this is not an opportunity to rub it in the faces of anyone either. We have to remember as Christians, as pro-life Christians, that at the heart of every one of these abortions, it's not an issue, it's a person. And these mothers that are going through these circumstances are hurting. They're being hurt. They're, feeling oppressed in a lot of ways, and there's stress, there's fear, there's all sorts of things that are going into these decisions. And most of them, I mean, there are some, I've seen some of these celebrities that have bragged about their abortions and say, oh yeah, that was the best thing I've ever done, and I've had like 10 abortions and it was wonderful. And of course that makes me sick. But most of the people that are getting abortions are not feeling that way. They're very, very torn and very, very, traumatized by it. At least the ones that I have talked to. And, it's not an easy decision for them. And so we need to, as Christians, be able to be there for them, to pray with them, to try to steer them towards life, yes, and to steer them to alternatives. There are pregnancy life centers, there's adoption options, there's all sorts of options other than abortion. And most of these women may just not have access to them or understand or realize that those options are available. And so we need to be able to promote them and support them and be able to steer them in that direction. But mostly be there for them, to minister to them, not, jump all over them or, scream in their face, you're going to burn in hell. No, I mean, that's not how we respond. We have to remember that these are people at the heart of it. And, whatever causes, that got them to this point. I mean, you could argue, well, yeah, you should have used protection. Yeah, you shouldn't have done that. But I mean, there's also the issues of, well, where's the guy in all of this too? Because they didn't get this way by themselves. And so I'm a firm believer in that about, let's hold the guys accountable too, in whatever ways we can. And so it's just, unfortunately, the woman is the one that gets kind of stuck in this situation and feels hopeless and has no other out. And so let's do whatever we can as a church and as a community to be able to reach out and to help in these situations. And so, anyway, that's just my opinions on what's going on right now. I certainly hope this opinion stands, and it is a major milestone and a major step forward towards ending abortion, although it is not the end of the story, as I said, and there's a lot more work to be done. But just continue to pray, keep ministering, keep standing in the breach against the child sacrifice that's being done in our country. Some estimated 63 million children have been aborted since Roe versus Wade, and so let's just be in prayer for that and be in prayer for what we can do moving forward. And I'll see you guys next week. We'll get back into Ephesians. So if you have any comments, feel free to comment below. Try to keep it civil, though, whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying. We want to be Christians and be godly in our responses. And I know this is a hotbed topic, and people can get very emotional about it. I can get very emotional about it, and so I understand that. But let's try to keep the comments civil in the comments below. And as always, if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe to keep up to date with the stuff that we're doing. And anyway, we'll catch you guys later. Have a good week.